Alright y'all, this is going to be a video on how to add power steering to an early Jeep Gladiator or AMC 327 for that matter. If you're doing this on a Marlin, Rambler, Ambassador, you're probably going to have a different ratio gearbox than this. This is a Saginaw gearbox out of a 60s Jeep truck. The Ambassador, I don't know if it had a 327. I believe that the Rambler and the Marlin would have been the 327 cars. But anyways, that's not what this video is about. This is for specifically the Jeep Gladiators. This here is your Eaton power steering pump. And like I said, it's your Saginaw gearbox. You have two hoses. This is a steering shaft, which it's the same for the manual steering and the power steering unit. So this is just an extra one now, but I got it from the parts truck just in case, and a belt. So that's the entirety of the power steering system for this truck. Pretty simple. Some trucks will have a hydraulic ram, and you'll have two more hoses coming off of the gearbox there, or maybe the pump somehow, however you have it configured. Some of them run a power steering cooler, but this one's pretty simple. But it will put out about 1,000 PSI at full lock. So by no means is this a weak pump, so it should perform pretty well for our intents and purposes. But let's go ahead and dive right into the meat and potatoes of it. First thing we're going to do is strip all the old stuff off. So here's your old Ross style gearbox. If you have one of these J trucks, the bolts are located on the inside there, and there's two, and then there's one up here, and that's how they're held on. Let me make sure I'm not missing any. Nope, I don't think so. And then there's your steering rag joint right there. So you'll take those two bolts out. That'll take the box off. This is your pitman arm. And then there's your tie rod. Your drag link. The tie rod is this longer one right here. And yeah, that's about all there is to it for the gearbox. And then here is where the power steering pump mounts up, is these two holes in the side of the head here. So yeah, it's pretty simple. That power steering belt I was showing y'all connects to the outermost groove on the crankshaft pulley, and then you'll just have your two hoses running down there into the top of the box, like basically right below the radiator water outlet. So yeah, let's start by coming over to the driver's side inner fender well. That's where the access holes are for the two 5/8 bolts that hold the gearbox on. You can see those there. So it's easier to get it from under there, but I just wanted to show y'all how you're supposed to get to them, is right there under the driver's side quarter panel. And one more thing real quick about the plumbing here. These are flare nuts, and you can see these are flared lines. This is your high pressure hose. And then this is your low pressure return hose. So you have a high pressure and a low pressure side on all these. This is basically like imagine like a rotary Mazda engine is how this pump generates the fluid pressure. It has like a rotating disc of sorts, and then it pumps it into this gearbox, which has a internally valved system. So your power steering actually is coming from the gearbox, whereas some of them use a hydraulic ram. But yeah, that's kind of general how this system works right here. So the first thing the instruction manual says to do is you're going to take loose this wing nut and remove the cover from the power steering pump. There's one of the old washers. You can see that's just about blown out and cracked. So we're going to get rid of that. And I've got the new rebuild kit here. It's some Amazon one that I bought from Sing Long or Sing Song or something, but it seems to be all right. And so you'll pull the top off, and then you'll be able to keep all your stuff together, don't lose it. And then you'll see down in here it says we need to pull the stud using a stud puller or two nuts. I've actually already tried that. It was too tight in there. I used these two 5/16 nuts, but you might try that. It might work with yours. In my case, it didn't, so I'm going to have to get a stud puller. So yeah, let's check that out. So the next part of the process, we're going to need to remove the stud that the wing nut bolts onto. You can see this is the inside of the pump reservoir. I'm having to use a stud puller for this. I tried using two nuts, and that just didn't work. So I ordered the stud puller on Amazon. and it works swimmingly, even with the amount of, what's the word I'm looking for, like how tall the stud is. It's not right. The force isn't being applied like right down where it bolts in. You know, it kind of has to come up at the top. Had no issues. So this is a really great piece of equipment. It's a performance tool, 1/4 inch to 3/8 stud puller or something like that. But as you can see, it just is so easy to get that stud out of there while I was struggling before. So you'll probably need that. I've just got it clamped in a vise. But yeah, that's where we're at. So we're going to pull the stud out. Then we're going to pull the 3/4 inch nut, I believe that is. I might be wrong. We'll see when we get there. But let's get this stud all the way out and then we'll check. All right, so that nut is actually a 1 inch. Let me see if I can get some light down in there. And we're just going to hit it with my impact and pop that open. Made short work of that, so we get that out. All right, now we got to take that retainer clip out. And one thing to point out, this retainer plate needs to have the nubs facing upwards. So you see how this configuration is right here? That is actually what grabs onto the reservoir. So you'll see these indentations here. The nubs fit over the top of that. And just like that, the top comes off. I believe that was probably our problem area. You can see there's a bunch of oil on both parts of the mating surfaces, and the gasket is, well, actually, it's basically non-existent now that I'm looking at it. There we go. So, yeah, you can just see that the right gasket especially is just chewed up and is no longer holding a seal. They're both flat, so those need to get replaced. That's probably what was causing our leak, but we're going to go ahead and rebuild the rest of the pump just to be sure. All right, so here we've removed the pump bracket. That's these 3 bolts, and they go in the back side of the housing here. And we've got the other 2 bolts that hold the body and the pump together. And so these are a little bit different. They're a little bit shorter, so just make note of that as well. And yeah, we're going to take this last bolt out and split the case halves. All right, and there is initial view of the case after it's been split. I didn't get it on camera just because it was kind of a delicate operation. All of these roller bearings have to maintain the same position as they're currently in. So we didn't want those to move. So when you separate it, you want the part that has the reservoir fittings on the bottom so that gravity keeps all of these little bits in place exactly where they're at. And then the top of the pump body will come off here, as you can see. So yeah, that's where we're at with it. I'm going to go and read a little bit more on the instruction manual. I took a picture of that and I'll loop it in here and you guys can pause it just to have some additional info. But the Woodruff key is right here. So that's what the TSM says we need to remove next, is just this little part right there. Now that I'm zooming in on the camera, it's actually better than my eyes. There's a little bit of abnormal wear on this mating surface right here, but hopefully that's nothing to be concerned with, and the pump will run just fine because it's the only one I've got. So we'll get that Woodruff key out and then we'll go from there. All right, so I went ahead and taken the rollers out. I kept them in the same pattern, with this being the top area where it's supposed to match up. So in order to get this propeller, impeller, whatever you want to call it out, there's a snap ring that sits right there in that groove. So you got to take that out. I just used a little screwdriver and just popped it up a little bit, and now it should just come up, yep, just like that. So that's good. We'll keep that right here for safe keepings. And I got it on a little bit of some paper so it doesn't get dirty. So let's go ahead and pull the impeller out. Hopefully. Let's see what's holding it up. Oh, I know what's going on. There's a little key right here, so you gotta get that key out before this will come out. I'm gonna put the camera down so I can do it. All right, so that's what you're left with. There's the rollers, there's the impeller, there's the input shaft, that's the pressure valve and this pressure spring. I think there's a part missing to that, but I'm not 100% sure. And your rotary cup, and yeah, that's basically all there is to it. So I'm going to start replacing the gaskets now. You can see there's a gasket right here, a gasket right here, 2 gaskets right here, and then the shaft seal gasket, which we'll talk about in a minute. After doing some research on the AMC forums, mainly everyone seems to agree that there's basically a problem when installing the shaft seal gasket. If I get this thing to focus for a second. Now we can see it. So there's the shaft. The oil seal fits right up against this edge right here. Right there. So what a lot of the guys suggest doing is filing this down so it's smooth and it doesn't rupture the oil shaft seal. Apparently there's also a way that you can do it backwards, so we might look at doing that as well. Alright, so we're getting ready to press the new oil shaft seal in. There is one thing I wanted to point out. Let's see if I can get it to focus. If you see it right there, right there, there's like a little black spot. Well, that's actually looks to be a hole in the casting or something, like there was a casting deformity. So I'm not sure if that is going to affect performance. It could have been when I was getting the old gasket out, but I doubt it because I didn't see any like piece of metal or anything. So it's possible that's been like that. I don't know. We're going to figure it out here shortly when we go to fire this thing up. But yeah, first thing I'm going to do is press this on there. So I just got a piece of wood, set on top and then whack it with the hammer a few times. All right, so there's the cam rotator thing installed. I'm not using the correct words. I know, I'm sorry. I can't remember the names of all these different parts, but then the impellers should go on. Let's see about that. There it is. And then we'll need to get the little pin here. That'll go in. Wipe that off really good on my shirt to make sure there's no dirt in there. So that goes in there like that. Then our pin. All right, so now we've got it basically put together. New oil shaft seal, the new O-rings in there. There's 2 new O-rings in the reservoir now. We've got the 1-inch nut securely in place. And yeah, just about wrapping it up. Got a few more gaskets left. Some of them, like this one, I don't know what they sent this for. There's nothing that big on the whole pump. It just like fits over it loosely. So, whoops. I don't know what they sent those for. There's a couple of them that didn't really do much, but we'll see what we're end up with left over. As a matter of fact, they sent more than they even mentioned on the instructions here. So I don't know what that's about, but we'll find out here shortly. So to install a stud, I'm just using 2 nuts. You'll just go like that and then tighten it down. Okay, so we're loosening the bolts. I might have mentioned this. They're 5/8. It's this one, and then that one right there that you got to take off. The top one is kind of weird to get to. You got to go in through this piece of like an access hole in the frame and like get a ratchet up in there, and that's basically how it is. So what I found was like the perfect length is a 1/2-inch ratchet with a 3/8 drive reducer and then a 3/8 socket, and that was like just the right length. And then your steering rag joint, you're gonna need a 1/2-inch, 2 1/2-inch wrenches, or in my case a ratchet and a wrench, and then that is gonna be these 2 bolts right here. So you'll just take these out. I can't do it with and hold the camera, but that's basically how it's gonna be configured. And then you'll just take those 2 bolts off. There's one up top. That'll disconnect it from the gearbox, and then we'll finish pulling those bolts out, and then we gotta disconnect the drag link, and that's it. That gearbox will be out. All right, so there's the new Saginaw steering box installed. I'm not gonna lie, this was a bitch to get on. You probably see it's now dark out. I've been like trying to bench press this thing in here for probably about 2 hours and line the holes up, and you have to put the steering shaft and rag joint back together before you bolt it up. So yeah, it was just a huge pain in the ass. It's done now though, and yeah, that's basically all we're gonna say for that. I do have a drop pitman arm for this. I'll show you guys how to install that. Actually, I should have taken the pitman arm off before I installed this, so I wasn't laying underneath it when that thing comes flying out at 90 miles an hour. All right, so here you can see the pump is installed. just tightens up. There's supposed to be 3 bolts. I need to get another bolt there, but that's your adjuster right there. The belt clips on to the outermost groove of the engine pulley, and then you can see the gearbox down there. I didn't have time to get new hoses because I was just wanting to test it. But you can see it does have a little bit of a leak, unfortunately, so I do need to rebuild that. I have the rebuild kit right over here. This part right here, I think it's called like a Susong, some sort of Amazon special, but it does apparently work for this carburetor. A guy on the full-size Jeep network told me about it. So yeah, that's the situation. Just basically need to fire it up and bleed the power steering pump and system first. So I'll show you guys that right here. I've got the front jacked up on jack stands, and we're just going to let the engine run. The technical service manual says to let it run for 10 minutes and then I've heard basically you turn the wheel side to side to get all the air out. So that's what we're going to do here.